Hello and welcome to our fifth Expert Insights Tech Talk. You know, we're talking hydrogen. Hydrogen is a potential solution to so many low emission challenges. So we decided we wanted to dive in a little deeper this time as well. And I've got two great experts. Let me introduce them to you. So I have Market Development Manager, Clean Energy, Robert Airey. Nice to see you, Robert. And Group Alternative Fuels Manager, Neil McPherson. Welcome to both of you. Before we get into the questions, tell me a bit more about what you do. I'll start with you, Neil.
Yes, I'm Neil McPherson. I work for the Filtration group within Parker Hannifin. Within my role, I manage the strategy for the alternative energies, and obviously there's a big focus on hydrogen. I work across 18 manufacturing divisions globally, making sure that we're designing the right products to satisfy the customer needs within the hydrogen value chain.
Outstanding. Well, thank you. It's great that you're here. And Robert.
So to add to what Neil does, I'm based in the UK, the sales office of Parker, and we have many facilities like what Neil talks about to make product, designing product, creating product, and some particularly for hydrogen use. So that means we're working with new companies or bringing new product to our existing companies that we deal with. So I'm that interface to bring all that together from a sales perspective.
Perfect. Well, it's great to have you both. Let's talk about where hydrogen sits today. I mean, there are so many groups who are pursuing lower emission targets. You have industry, commerce, governments, of course. How important is hydrogen to achieving these low emission targets? I'll ask you, Robert.
It's critical. I think the press has highlighted that this is a big player. It's sustainable, it's green, it's no emissions or very low emissions, depend how you make it. So it's going to affect everyone's life in how they work, how they travel. So it's going to have an impact on everyone. So that's critical to how we live. But at the moment, that impact is perhaps seen by more the companies who are steering that or involved in that in the first instance to bring that to the market.
And so it's interesting because it is an older technology in so much as it's been around, and yet the opportunity now is huge and very exciting. And of course, there are challenges. So you've got production, storage, distribution, and usage. How are we dealing with the challenges today?
That's a very good question, and people do ask that. So from a Parker perspective, it's looking at, like you say, creation of hydrogen as various technologies, as Neil mentions, the side he works in. It's looking what the infrastructure government's doing and the ramp up and the scale of that needs to be deployed. We're talking an energy revolution here. It is really big for humankind and the planet. So you've got to look at big scale. That is the challenge. There's feasibility studies going on, but you've got to look at big scale production of product, safe, your supply chain, and being ready for this ramp up scale that's going to happen very, very soon.
So the ramp up is coming, and there is definitely this sense that we're at the beginning of a very exciting period of time. So Robert, I'll stick with you for one more. How much will this ramp up steer the future of hydrogen and the industry? And how close is the industry to this objective of being able to ramp up successfully and to start making a difference?
Yeah, you will see alignments between countries and governments and targets. There's global targets, 2030, 2050, that's steering that. So the companies, governments, countries, companies all putting plans in place to adopt green themselves, right, to make a green product, but then to create a product that's going to initiate green technologies in creating the hydrogen and distributing it. So ramp up, one is the deadlines, the time scales, but it's the ramp up that's going to change the face of this. Which companies are going to appear to support that infrastructure globally, have the network in place, the supply chain in place, the quality in place, and maintain that, including the infrastructure of your company and the people involved and associated with all of that.
There's a lot of work to be done, right, Neil? Take us through what you see currently as the opportunities and the challenges of this ramp up for suppliers, for manufacturers, from your perspective.
Well, certainly the opportunities are immense. We can see there the commitments that have been made by governments all around the planet. There's hard commitments for decarbonisation, getting to net zero. And then consequently, the way to decarbonize, a big part of that's going to be through the adoption of hydrogen. And therefore, there's opportunities for all of the technologies that go into that sector. So whether it's gas production, whether it's distribution, whether it's use for fuel cells, or even indeed for carbon capture from some grey hydrogen production processes. Huge opportunities. The challenges in the short term, I see it very much in terms of the education piece. So it's educating the public to make them or to bring them into the discussion, actually, to make them aware that these new technologies are coming into things that are going to be adopted into their everyday life. The other challenge that we're seeing in the industry is just generally a skill shortage. As the market ramps up, there's increased demand for all sorts of people with hydrogen background, and right now there's a skill shortage. That's a challenge that I think is present in most countries around the world. So with that in mind, there's we're starting to see, for example, in the region where I come from, the northeast of England, we're starting to see some of the technical colleges there introducing training courses, education for young people starting out in their career. So they're not, for example, gas fitting. They're not just looking into learning how to install a gas boiler with traditional gas. They're also learning how to service and install a hydrogen-powered boiler. So there's that sort of education going on, but ultimately all of those, as we ramp up the education, we ramp up the number of people coming to the workplace, they'll fill the green hydrogen jobs and they'll facilitate the growth of this market.
Obviously, Parker's a global organization. Have you seen examples of this education, whether it's educating households or indeed educating people to elevate their level of skills? Have you seen any good examples of this being rolled out in other areas of the world?
I think in terms of the public education, it was a story I can relay. I was recently on vacation, and my wife and I used the public bus service, which is right now is a diesel-powered vehicle. So we got on the bus and we sat down there, but we were in a foreign country. But there's a little display there that continuously runs with public service messages, and to my surprise, there's a message all about hydrogen refueling. It was in Spanish, but obviously I got the gist of it.
Right.
But it's educating the public about the need to decarbonize the local transport network as a broad message, and then how they're going to do that is by deploying these hydrogen-powered buses. And then it went on to give a little information about a refueling station that had been placed in the location. So I think, to me, that was a fantastic example of like how to educate the public in a situation where, you know, I guess they're a bit of a trapped audience when you're sitting on a bus. But the point is they access that information, and that goes into the psyche. They now know when they see a bus driving along with a big H2 on the side of it, that where the hydrogens come from.
Very interesting. And on education, Robert, it's not just the households and the customers that need to be educated, but also in some cases regulators, people who are making big important decisions that will impact the entire industry. Again, any examples that you've seen of how conversations are being had between different groups that elevate the knowledge and give all of us a better chance at being able to embrace this opportunity?
Yeah, there's a lot of dialogue around that. People want to make a safe product and make a standard product. So these regulating authorities, they do approach companies like Parker and similar companies to ask what we're working on, what standards we're looking to comply to, what materials we're going to be creating to comply, or what standards we think should be deployed. So they're asking the manufacturers, the scientists, getting universities involved as well, and we're all collaborating around this. And often these groups get together, there's alliances and associations around this who will take different parts of sectors around hydrogen together in a room, and they'll talk about what are the needs, what needs to change. And that often is written and presented to government as well, to deploy that and to create a safe standard for everyone around it.
Outstanding. Robert, let me stick with you. Tell me about the conversations that you have with Parker clients and customers around what this opportunity represents when it comes to lowering emissions, what they should be thinking about, and the role that hydrogen can play.
Yeah, so a lot of companies we talk to are perhaps working on a project, specifically maybe a vehicle or maybe an infrastructure. So they're looking for immediate products, hopefully that pre-exist. And there's a lot of products out there that comply or is compatible. But looking long-term, as you mentioned, standards, approvals. So they're going to be talking about that long term as the manufacturer. What are we seeing? What are we working on? And what are the trends outside of our immediate scope? And that's the picture we're telling people to take a look at. When this product comes to market, how is it scalable?
Right.
How is it going to be perceived? How is it going to be serviced? In the next generation of people, how are they going to be able to know it and safely work on it? So you take a project and you expand it out for a longevity of what's going to be with us for the next 100 years plus.
So let me ask you a follow-on. What is the risk to organizations of doing nothing, of standing back and saying, I'm going to wait and see how this shapes up? What is the risk of taking your time?
I think that's an interesting question. The market's moving very quickly, and it's going to move even quicker. So the fear is, yes, you'll be left behind. And perhaps the way we work and perceive companies could change. You could have green credentials. Maybe there's penalties on your carbon emissions. So it makes sense to be an early adopter to get ahead of that curve. It's going to help your business, but it's also going to help the public, it's going to help the planet. So it's something we shouldn't be looking to wait on if we can, is to get involved as soon as we can.
There's some big wins right there. And let me ask you, Neil, about the importance of standardization. From the knowledge that I have, which is limited compared to you, of course, there are different standards that apply to different industries and across different regions around the world. What advice or guidance can you offer us around the importance of standardization?
Yeah, I think what we've seen, certainly from my experiences working with some of the large electrolyzer manufacturers, is that this is a developing space. Up until recent years, a lot of the technology was on a demonstration scale with comparatively low volumes, production volumes, and also it was manufactured in different parts of the world. So consequently, you have this sort of, let's say, a non-standard approach. You have maybe small suppliers. You might have different suppliers in different regions. But when you're scaling up and you're sending equipment all over the world, you really need to move towards a standard approach. So a standard product backed by the relevant approvals, and obviously with a global supply, a timely supply supported by a global player. A simple example, imagine if we built up an electrolyzer, and then in that electrolyzer there was a component that was sourced differently on 3 different continents. When the call comes into the technical support with a failure of that component, rather than immediately go looking to troubleshoot the problem, the first question is, oh, hold on a second, which one is it? Right. Which manufacturer, what's the serial number, and a whole load of additional work is accrued.
All right, so there's a lot to consider there. We've talked about this phrase ramping up, and we know it's coming, Robert, but I guess my question as we come towards the end of our conversation is, what does this ramp up look like, and where are we at the moment? So how close are we? What other information could you share with our audience about this ramp up opportunity?
There's been a lot of feasibility studies, prototypes. So to add to what Neil is saying, at some point you've had to use a standard product because it hasn't been created. So you have to have a company who can engineer a solution which is great for a prototype. When you start making high volume, you get the human error element comes in, so the better the product, you start reducing the risk. So you need a supply chain that can push that out, but also you're going to have to do that in a way that it's going to supply your customers globally to a standard. You don't want to be isolating yourself from small to a large supplier. If you go small, you've narrowed your margin of who you're going to work with. So ramping up is choose your supply chain carefully, and it's the manufacturing locations that have the understanding of material science, longevity testing facilities, have worked in the industry a very long time. Parker's worked in hydrogen for over 50 years. It's a gas. It's not new to us. We understand the constraints, but we also have the ability to ramp up. We are a high volume manufacturer with quality standards. And that's what you've got to be looking at, because when this happens, it's got to be done right the first time around. There's no room for error.
Excellent. And also, of course, given the challenges and the opportunities, I know through the conversations you have with clients and customers, there are some very interesting partnerships that are happening because organizations can see there is an opportunity here and you have to find the right people to work alongside.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. We do see that where companies are merging, collaborating together to share technologies. It's almost like you could say, if you're going to make a valve, you need some other kind of connectivity that doesn't exist before because of standards and specifications that existed. So companies are merging. What that's doing is creating an alliance to bring technology to the market quicker with elements of what they're merging. It's already been proven in sector. And that's important, and that will accelerate it. So you will see more and more of this sort of merging together and working closer just to facilitate what's needed.
Thank you. And Neil, if you could leave our viewers with maybe just one thought about the expansion of hydrogen usage around the world. And I know it's hard to come up with just one because there are so many thoughts that you've got, but what would that be?
Yeah, for me, obviously, the education, let's start to educate or broaden the education to the public, make them aware of the opportunities that are coming about, then build up the workforce, get the qualified people in place to support the expansion of hydrogen, and then beyond that, really, just it's a case of execution, really installing. Let's see these first demonstrations expand into large scale systems. Let's see. I know in the UK, for example, the small experiments are being expanded out. So, for example, piping hydrogen into a small village and having every house converted over. Let's see some real examples of decarbonisation or build upon the already existing examples. And then that'll put us all in a much better place. It'll obviously help to decarbonise. It'll hopefully help with global warming, and it'll leave our kids with a much brighter future.
There are so many opportunities out there, but are there any specific use cases that either you've heard about or you've seen that are interesting that you might want to share?
There's a spin-off of hydrogen, because when you've got your hydrogen and you merge it back with your oxygen, you're creating water. So some interesting companies and technologies we're seeing, if you can create green steam, you can clean up sanitary, distillery, chemical environments. So a carbon footprint of a company is reduced just by adopting hydrogen technologies into their facilities. And we're seeing the adoption of creating green steam through clean hydrogen source. And then you can, using old school technologies like turbines that can be powered, that can facilitate a motor to create electricity into a building, into a gearbox, or into a wheel to drive mobility. So while it's not hydrogen fuel cell related, but you're using a green energy source from hydrogen back into steam, which distills back into water, you can reheat it, you just keep the cycle. So it's cleaning up industry and creating other technologies. Perhaps it's not in the public eye yet, but very exciting developments.
That's really good. I like that. Neil?
Yeah, one example that comes to mind is actually in the world of film and film production, outside broadcasting, and that's related to the power supply in remote locations. So historically, that's been facilitated by diesel-powered generators. Where the industry is transitioning to is basically fuel cell-based power supply systems. So imagine that green hydrogen is produced, it's delivered to a remote location. So you have a source of hydrogen, and then you have a fuel cell-based backup or stationary power system. That hydrogen is converted over to electricity, which is therefore used to facilitate the outside broadcast, so therefore making the outside broadcast carbon neutral.
There's a lot of work to be done. There are challenges out there, but the opportunity is huge and the ramp up is obviously coming. Thank you both very much indeed.